to perform magics and to do things, and yet we have taken the basic power and authority that is required for communities to act. Huh? A traditional ruler has what? Cultural and perhaps moral authority in the community. It doesn't have any formal constitutional authority in the community. Okay? So, and it's because there is that absence of governance at that community level. Communities are taking their fate into their own hands. Their security is not ensured. They can't provide their own security. If they have a government, their vigilantes will be properly managed as a state institution, a community government institution. But so what are communities doing? Communities are finding themselves between the devil and the deep blue sea. Okay? If you want to wait on the security forces that are miles away from you, that face their own challenges of mobility, logistics, and the rest of that, if you want to wait and depend on them to respond to you when you are in crisis, then that's why they come after the crisis, after the damage has been done. So what communities do is that they take their fate into their own hands. They negotiate with these actors and say, look, and set some boundaries. You can do this. It's communities pay taxes, you know that, to these people, in terms of sometimes cash, sometimes produce, farm produce, and all of that. That's their own way of coping and ensuring their own community. And so, but the danger in that is that communities now begin to compete amongst them. Because if you have negotiated with the bandits, with organized criminals, it means that you are leaving your neighboring community open. Okay? And so the neighboring community also goes into negotiation and offers better terms. You know? So you get yourself in a race to the bottom. You know, a very vicious circle of what is happening. So, yes, on the surface of it, it looks like communities are culprits, but it's really because communities themselves have to suffer. If you look at that same report, it says that only 31% of cases were actually reported to the police or to any security agency. Why? People don't trust that. People don't believe that is going to bring back their loved ones quickly enough. Okay, so communities just negotiate directly, get back these people and pay ransom. That's why we had that 2.2 trillion, in ransom. And the danger in that is that, as we have all stated, we all saw coming, organized crime, violent extremism, rural banditry, they have become organized crime syndicates. They have become a form of livelihood. In Nigeria today, it's a 2.2 trillion naira economy. And it's a shadow economy. It's not an economy in the formal economy. It does not contribute anything to the GDP of the country. So that's the challenge that we face now. And we cannot address this. And for me, the major point really is that we need to restore some form of formal governance to communities. We have community development associations. Okay, we can take up those structures, let them become elected, let them have constitutional role. Let it be that they have tenures, and they can, but give them some authority to manage community resources. And then traditional institutions can play a role of an advisory role, a supervisory role over that form of government. So the point is that the drivers of violent extremism, they live in communities. The impact of violent extremism is felt in communities. And so essentially, really, it is also within communities that solutions should come. And communities should be at the driving seat of finding that solution and implementing that solution, of driving that process. And communities have been trying their best to do this. Government and state institutions and civil society actors have also been trying their best to do this. But then there is a very big and huge gap. And the gap is really a governance gap. Because essentially also, violent extremism does not thrive where you have good governance, where you have transformative governance. And it's not just governance in terms of delivery of basic services. It's also governance in terms of inclusion. yeah, representation and all of that. So really, violent extremism is essentially a governance challenge. It's not a security challenge. The biggest problem is that we view it globally as a security challenge. And because it is viewed as a security challenge, then hence even the phrases we use, war on terror. So it's a war, so it's militarized. But we need to address governance challenges. In Nigeria, these governance challenges are made even more pronounced by the fact that our communities are essentially ungoverned spaces. In other words, in our communities, there is essentially really no form of formal governance that is taking place. Because in the overwhelming majority of our communities, maybe 90–95% of our communities, what we have are what we call traditional institutions. We ourselves have called them traditional institutions. We have said that they are custodians of our culture. And by that, we have simply just swept them aside, that they are not necessary. So in terms of how do you administer the community, how do you run the affairs of the community, there is no governance that is taking place. And so there is a gap in the sense of a formal institution of community government, self-government by communities. What communities are doing is that they are finding ways to fill this gap, okay? But they are informal ways. So all our communities have community development associations, maybe not called that name. These institutions are already representative because they represent different wards in the community. They represent the diversity of the community, residents and indigenes and all of that. Yeah. But they don't have any formal authority or any formal power. They cannot really govern. So, and the biggest lesson over the last 10 years of implementing the national policy on PCVE is that gap where the transformative actions are necessary and required, that gap exists there. So we have a situation where people are bringing solutions from outside, NGOs, local government, state government, federal government. We are bringing solutions from outside into the community. Communities become recipients of these solutions. Even when we have involved them in the design and in everything, communities don't have the power or the authority for sustainability, okay? And to carry on, because they don't have the authority of a government. So, if there is one lesson that I have personally learned, it is that we need to address that governance challenge at the community level. And then I buttressed it with just looking at it, that when we talk about governance, because what is really governance, Abi? It's about administration. It's about delivering services. But the services that we want to deliver, the basic services that we want to deliver, where are we delivering them? In communities, it's not in the air. It is the only place in a country, in a state, in a local government, where people live is in the community. People don't live in a state. People don't live in a country. People don't live on a continent. They live in a community that is in a local government, that is in a state, that is in a country, that is in a continent. So, therefore, it's important that we should begin to see basic services as community services and basic infrastructure as community infrastructures. And so the only way this can be done is that if it is managed by community themselves. Again, therefore, you also need a community government. And I include in services, security is a service. Many of our communities we have night watch people, we have different vigilantes and the rest of that. Why do you think we have vigilantes? If you look at the past in our communities, every palace, near the palace, you always usually have a traditional prison. In the palace, elders sit in judgment over cases. So it meant that we had community governments and institutions. We had a community justice system, okay, and so on and so forth. But now, those things no longer exist. And we have created formal institutions, but they are hanging because they are not anchored on those community ones. So we need to go back to that, and that's the point that I was making. And that's why, for instance, this program has become very important for us in terms of the fact that this kind of experiences that we are learning, expertise that we are gaining, how do we put it to a more effective use? The only way we can put it to a more effective use is if we can have a community of practitioners who are engaged in this, and that we must include community members who face this on a daily basis, who are actually doing some things. We must also include them as practitioners and include them in a community of practice. And that if we have a community of practice, then it will be possible for us to share experience. It will be possible to mentor, It will be possible for us to fine-tune our approaches, our strategies. It will be possible for us to develop resource materials, to develop toolkits and the rest of that. I, for one, as a person, I feel somewhat ashamed that if you Google PCV, violent extremism in Nigeria today, and I'll give you an assignment, and you are looking for reports on violent extremism, including on Nigeria, they're largely written by foreigners, and so on and so forth. And yet we've been working on these issues for 10 years. The expertise resides in this country. How can we encourage and enable this indigenous expertise of Nigerians in the academia, in civil society, in the communities, among state actors, And so that's what the community of practice is about. And basically, it's about uniting theory and practice, uniting knowledge and practice, and uniting research with the communities.